I left without making any noise. That man who had discarded me like an old shoe had gone crazy. He came pestering me, saying that he agreed to marry me. In response, I just coldly replied, "Oliver, the Ava who loved you is already dead." At my wedding banquet with my boyfriend, his first love showed up. I politely offered her a toast. But to my surprise, she slapped the wine glass out of my hand on the spot. "Ava, what are you so smug about? I've made concessions again and again for Oliver. Why are you being so aggressive and hounding me? Do you really want to drive me to death?" Oliver flew into a rage, immediately shielding his first love behind him and glaring at me furiously. "Ava, what are you doing? Look what you've driven Emma to. If you're like this, don't blame me." With that, he gave me a vicious glare and left, protecting Emma without looking back. I panicked and chased after him, trying to explain, but I don't know who tripped me, and I fell to the ground, scraping a big gash on my skin. Before leaving, Oliver sneered at me and said, "Stop acting. It's disgusting." I was sent to the hospital in a daze by my friends and found out that my left arm was broken. I stayed in the hospital for a full half-month to recuperate. During these half-month, Oliver never came to visit me in the hospital, not even making a single phone call. It was as if I didn't exist at all. I was completely disappointed in Oliver. Finally, I called my home, which I hadn't contacted for 3 years. "Dad, I agree to the arranged marriage you mentioned before." On the day I was discharged from the hospital, I was all alone. The plaster on my arm hadn't been removed yet, so I could only take a taxi home. However, when I got home, I found that the password of the combination lock had been changed long ago, and I couldn't open it at all. Helpless, I had to call Oliver. But to my surprise, it was Emma, Oliver's first love, who answered the phone. "Sister Ava, Oliver is taking a bath. Wait a moment. I'll open the door for you right away." With just these words, Emma hung up the phone directly. Soon, the villa door was opened. Emma greeted me in with great enthusiasm, acting like the mistress of the house. "Sister Ava, you're finally back. Come in quickly. Come to think of it, it's my fault. I forgot to tell you that the password at home has been changed. It's all because of my bad memory. Oliver changed the password to my birthday. Sister Ava, don't get the wrong idea." At this time, Emma was wearing a loose nightgown, and a hint of charm was vaguely visible beneath the collar. Oliver also came downstairs from the bedroom at this moment, also wearing a nightgown, looking a bit tired. If it were before, seeing them, a man and a woman, alone in the room, both wearing loose nightgowns, I would definitely get angry and directly question Oliver, asking him to explain clearly. But now, I just nodded indifferently and said nothing. But even though I didn't want to ask, Oliver, instead, seemed to be trying too hard to explain. "Ava, there's really nothing between me and Emma. Emma's house is being renovated these days, so she's staying at our place temporarily. Don't think too much." Listening to Oliver's explanation, what I thought about was the half-month when I was alone in the hospital. I couldn't help but laugh at myself in my heart. This was my so-called good boyfriend. At this moment, all my feelings for him disappeared completely. I responded indifferently, "I'm not misunderstanding." My steps didn't pause at all. Now, I just wanted to go back to my room and have a good rest, but Oliver wouldn't let it go. He chased after me and kept talking non-stop. "Ava, can you stop being so difficult and be more generous? You know that Emma's family is all in other places. It's so hard for a girl like her to be at home alone. What's wrong with letting her stay at home?" I listened to his words in silence, but my heart ached. She was having a hard time at home alone. He probably forgot that I was also alone in the hospital for half a month. If Emma had it hard, what about me? "Oliver, I've said it. I'm not misunderstanding. If you want her to stay, let her stay. Looking at Oliver in front of the bedroom door, I had to stop and repeat it again. But Oliver didn't believe me at all. Instead, he thought I was throwing a tantrum and immediately turned cold. Ava, don't be ungrateful. You've been showing a long face since you entered the door. I've explained to you so many times. You'd better stop while you're ahead. Be careful I won't show you any respect. I sneered. I didn't want to waste any more time with him, so I just bypassed him. But Oliver reached out to stop me and happened to grab my arm that hadn't fully recovered. In pain, my legs went weak, and I directly bumped into the bedroom door. The bedroom door opened with a bang. Under the light, I could see everything in the room clearly. The bed was in a mess, and several pieces of lace lingerie were scattered on the ground. Oliver panicked and quickly blocked in front of me. Ava, don't misunderstand. These clothes, I was going to give them to you as a gift. I looked around blankly. I just felt that in this huge villa, there was no place for me to stay. I just replied with a dull "oh" and turned to go to the guest room. Just as I put my things down, my mom called, and her voice was full of joy. Ava, I heard from your dad that you've finally come to your senses. Mom has been worried about you for these 3 years. Come back quickly. Mom has prepared your favorite food for you. I have to say, that boyfriend of yours really doesn't deserve my Ava. Since you've decided to come back this time, let's set the wedding date a month later. How about that? Hearing my mom's nagging voice, my eyes filled with tears. No matter when, my mom's love for me has never diminished. At this moment, my heart suddenly felt warm. With red eyes, I smiled and said, Mom, don't worry. I'll definitely be back. After Sophia's birthday party, I'll leave. I won't miss the wedding. After hanging up the phone and tidying up a bit, I was about to rest. But at this moment, the door of the guest room was suddenly pushed open. Oliver came in with a plate of cherries. A trace of suspicion flashed across his face. Ava, I heard you mention the wedding just now, right? A trace of displeasure flashed in his eyes. Didn't I tell you? Emma is in a bad mood recently. Let's wait for our wedding. What's the rush? Looking at his dissatisfied look, I laughed at myself in my heart. The wedding was not as important as his first love's mood. But soon I let it go. Anyway, he was already a thing of the past for me. I said indifferently, it's my friend's wedding. Upon hearing my explanation, Oliver was stunned. Then a trace of embarrassment flashed in his eyes. He coughed lightly to cover up this embarrassment and obsequiously presented the cherries in his hand in front of me. Ava, I was overthinking. Don't be angry. Oh, by the way, I've sent Emma away. Have some cherries. I prepared them specially for you. I ignored him. Oliver's expression froze, and his eyes turned cold. Ava, what else do you want? I sincerely apologize to you. Why are you still holding on to such a trivial matter? Stop making a fuss. I laughed. Oliver, after all these years, you still haven't remembered that I'm allergic to cherries? As I spoke, I walked out of the room, not wanting to look at Oliver anymore. Oliver followed me several times, wanting to say something, but in the end, he remained silent. In the past, he would remember every little detail about me and keep them in his heart. But somehow, everything had changed. It seemed to be the time when his first love came back. I ignored Oliver following behind me and went about preparing to change my dressing on my own. And just then, Oliver finally seemed to notice my injury. A trace of guilt flashed in his eyes, and he instinctively wanted to come forward to help. I frowned, thinking about rejecting him. Just then, Oliver's phone rang. When he saw that it was Emma calling, he answered it without hesitation. Emma, what's wrong? On the other end of the phone, Emma's weak voice came through. Oliver, I seem to have caught a cold. I'm so weak all over. Can you bring me some medicine? Hearing this, how could Oliver sit still? Emma, don't worry. I'll come right away. Lie down and rest first. Then, after hanging up the phone, he didn't even glance at me and rushed out in a hurry. The medicine bottle on the table was knocked over, and the pills spilled all over the floor. Looking at the silent and empty room that had returned to its former state and the closed door, I couldn't help but laugh self-deprecatingly. Sure enough, it was always like this. Every time at this kind of moment in the past, Emma would always call Oliver. Every time it was either a cold or a bad mood. Couldn't Oliver see that all these were just acts? However, I didn't care anymore. After that day, Oliver never came back home. But Emma's moments on social media became more frequent. Each post was specifically tagged with me, and all of them were ambiguous photos of her and Oliver. I ignored all of them and instead started to prepare for my resignation. The head of the HR department, looking at the reason for my resignation, which was getting married and going back home, was quite helpless. Ava, you can get married, but even if you're marrying Oliver, there's no need to resign. You know how much the company values you. I lowered my head, remained silent for a moment, and then smiled brightly. I'm not marrying Oliver. I'm going home. The head of the department was stunned. Then she closed her mouth and didn't say anything more. As the work handover progressed, before I knew it, there were less than 3 days left until my departure. I didn't dare to procrastinate and quickly started packing my luggage. Fortunately, Oliver had been with Emma recently and wasn't at home. Otherwise, if he saw me packing, he would probably cause trouble again. During these last few days, I didn't want him to ruin my mood anymore. In the bedroom I shared with Oliver, there were a lot of our photos together. He once said that he would record every bit of our love with a camera, and when we were old and our hair was white, we would recall the past together. There was also a thick stack of love letters he had written to me. The content was naive but full of love. Looking at these things, even though I had given up on Oliver, my heart still ached. We had truly loved each other once. At that time, our eyes were only for each other, and we missed each other all the time. No matter how tired he was, Oliver would hold me tightly every night and whisper his love for me in my ear. But in just a few years, everything had changed. I wasn't tired of it yet, but he already was. I closed my eyes and after a long time, I burned all those things to ashes, leaving nothing behind. In the entire villa, there was no longer anything related to me. The day before I left was also Sophia's birthday party. Sophia was my college tutor and could be considered the matchmaker between Oliver and me. The teacher liked bracelets, so I specially went to a temple to get a string of 18-bead bracelet. I opened my phone and saw that the last message from Oliver was more than 10 days ago. He was very angry at that time. Ava, it's all your fault. If it weren't for your jealousy, how could Emma have caught a cold and gotten sick? I won't be coming back recently. I need to take care of Emma. I just glanced at the message and then tossed the phone aside. Presumably because he didn't get a reply from me, he even called me angrily to question me. Ava, didn't you see my message? How could you be so heartless now? Emma is sick because of you. Why don't you call to apologize? I just found it ridiculous. Emma was the one Oliver took the initiative to send away. What did it have to do with me? In the end, I directly hung up the phone. My first encounter with Oliver was in Sophia's class. Once, Oliver was late for class. Sophia looked at him and then at me, with a strange look in her eyes. You two sit together every day. Are you dating? You're really interesting. One came on time and the other was late. Didn't you remind each other? At that time, both of us blushed. The Ava at that time could never have imagined that she would waste so many years of her youth on Oliver. With these thoughts in my mind, I had already arrived at Sophia's house. As soon as she saw me, Sophia enthusiastically pulled me into the house. When she learned that I was about to go back to my hometown and had agreed to the arranged marriage at home, she was stunned for a long time and said in disbelief, "Does Oliver know? We're not suitable." I didn't explain too much. Sophia sighed. "Ava, since you've decided, the teacher won't say much. The teacher has also heard something about what happened between you and Oliver. It's not your fault. Originally, the teacher wanted to be a peacemaker between you two, but now it seems unnecessary. It's just that Oliver doesn't have this good fortune. Over the past few years, I cut off contact with my family for Oliver. I didn't cry when facing Oliver's unreasonable protection of Emma. I didn't cry either when I was blamed by Oliver, had a broken arm, and was hospitalized alone. But now, tears suddenly welled up. Teacher, you must take good care of yourself in the future. Come to my place as a guest if you have the chance. As for Oliver, he has nothing to do with me anymore." I didn't want to talk about him any longer. After visiting the teacher, I was ready to leave. I had to catch the earliest flight tomorrow morning. But things are so coincidental. Just then, the doorbell rang. Oliver and Emma appeared outside the door. Their fingers were intertwined. Seeing that I was also there, Oliver quickly let go. "Ava, don't misunderstand." Emma also took the opportunity to explain, "Sister Ava, there's nothing between me and Brother Oliver. My hands were just a bit cold, and he was warming them for me. Brother Oliver still loves you very much. Sister Ava, you mustn't misunderstand Brother Oliver. Otherwise, I'll feel really guilty." Hearing Emma's words, Oliver quietly pulled her behind him. "Emma means well." His look clearly showed that he was afraid I would hurt Emma. I laughed self-deprecatingly. If it were before, I would have been very sad, right? But fortunately, I don't love him anymore. During the meal, he kept paying attention to Emma and didn't even give me a single glance. He peeled shrimp for her and cared whether the food suited her taste. The two of them were so intimate that anyone who saw them would think they were a couple. Even Sophia couldn't stand it anymore. Finally, she couldn't help but throw down her chopsticks and bowl. "Oliver, what on earth do you mean? Ava is still here. You two are really out of line." Hearing this, Emma quickly broke free from Oliver's embrace. "Sophia, don't be angry. We two are childhood friends, so we're a bit closer. There's really nothing going on. Don't think too much." As she spoke, a look of grievance flashed across her face. Oliver nonchalantly picked up another chopstick of food for her. "Emma, eat quickly. Eat more." Sophia's face turned even colder, and she snorted, "Don't call me teacher. I don't have a student like you." Then, she frowned and looked at Oliver. "Oliver, what about the vows you made to Ava before? I remember you promised her a lifetime of being monogamous. What, did you change your mind so quickly?" Oliver, however, curled his lips in mockery. "Yes, I promised, but who knew she would turn out to be so vicious now?" As soon as Sophia heard this, she got a bit angry and wanted to say something more. But I stopped the teacher and slightly shook my head at her. I no longer cared about what the truth was. I didn't want to ruin the teacher's good mood on her birthday because of this. Sophia fell silent and glared at Oliver with a look of frustration at his lack of progress or ability. And Oliver, as if he understood something, looked at me with even more contempt. "Ava, you're already so old, yet you're still like a child, running to tell the teacher. I'm not saying I won't marry you. What's the rush?" I sneered. "Oliver, you don't seriously think that I, Ava, can only marry you, do you? I'm telling you now, even if I stay single for the rest of my life, I won't marry you." For a moment, the atmosphere at the scene became tense. At first, I really didn't want to have a falling out with Oliver, but his words really disgusted me. At this time, Emma poured a cup of hot tea and looked at me with an apologetic face. Sister Ava, it's all my fault. If it weren't for me, you two wouldn't have quarreled. I'm sorry to you. As she spoke, she picked up the cup of hot tea. But whether it was intentional or not, as soon as she picked up the hot tea, her hand got scalded, and she let go, spilling the water on herself. Her long-sleeved arm instantly turned red. Her eyes were full of tears, and she looked extremely aggrieved. The way Oliver nervously helped her look around for burn ointment made me see the Oliver who had once loved me deeply. Before I could come to my senses, I heard Oliver's scolding voice. Ava, I'm so disappointed in you. He directly picked up Emma and walked towards the door. Early the next morning, I got on the car going to the airport. In the car, Oliver called me. As soon as the call connected, the sound of Emma crying and shouting in pain came from the other end. He was anxious on the other end. What are you guys doing? It's just a dressing change. Why does it hurt so much? Be gentle with her. Half a minute later, he seemed to remember that I was still on the line. Ava, if you still want to live a good life with me, quickly apologize to Emma. If it weren't for you, how could Emma assuming is have been scalded? I give you half an hour to come back. I laughed. I still didn't know what I had done wrong. Why could so many illogical things all be blamed on me? I looked at the scar on my arm left from the last time I went to the hospital. All the grievances and disappointments of these days suddenly burst out. I said calmly, Oliver, it's over between us. The announcement that the plane was about to take off sounded without giving him a chance to react. I directly turned off my phone. After getting on the plane, I sat in my seat and fell into a deep sleep. I had a very long dream. In the dream were the scenes of these years with Oliver. From the initial sweetness to the gradual estrangement after Emma came back. I was woken up by the little girl next to me. Sister, do you need help? She pointed to my face, and then I realized that I was crying. I smiled and thanked her. Before long, the plane arrived in another city where there was no Oliver. Before reaching the exit, I saw my parents coming to pick me up from afar. They brought a few assistants. As soon as we met, they took all the things in my hands. Mom's eyes were red, and she patted my arm. You've had a hard time. I called out Mom in a hoarse voice. Her body trembled, and she almost lost her balance. Dad wasn't in a much better state at the moment. On the way back, looking at the backs of my parents, I realized that they had really grown old. After arriving home, Mom held my hand and looked at it again and again. Why are there so many scars on your hand? What happened? Why don't you take good care of yourself? Mom feels so heartbroken when she sees this. But from that day until now, Oliver didn't even ask me once if it hurt. I'm a girl in my early 20s who loves beauty. At this moment, I just felt extremely sad. I lowered my head, my nose turning red, for fear that my parents would notice something was wrong. Seeing this, Mom didn't say anything more. After sighing, she suddenly became happy again. By the way, everything for tomorrow's wedding is almost ready. Your wedding dress is in the room. Your groom picked it out personally. I was quite curious about who the person was, someone who was willing to get married to me without even meeting me first, and it was a flash marriage. In response to my question, Mom raised her eyebrows and smiled. About this, he said he would tell you the answer in person tomorrow night. I wanted to ask a few more questions, but I was too tired. Leaning on the sofa, I almost fell asleep. The wound on my arm was rubbed, and I winced in pain. Mom got nervous and quickly called the family doctor. When the doctor took off my clothes and exposed my entire arm, the horrible scars made Mom burst into tears instantly. Old Lou, look at our daughter. She has suffered so much. To keep my parents from worrying, I didn't tell them about that thrilling scene. Looking at my parents' worried expressions, thinking about being abandoned by Oliver, getting a broken arm, and then being scolded by him for no reason, I lowered my eyes, held Mom's hand, and comforted her. "Mom, I'll never leave you guys again." After the doctor examined me again, I finally had the chance to lie down on the bed. The soft bed made me fall asleep in no time. I slept until the next day when the servant came to knock on the door. After washing up, I put on the bridal gown. Looking at myself in the mirror, I couldn't help but think of the last year I was with Oliver. At that time, his long-lost first love, Emma, had just come back. The talk in the WeChat moments about when we would get married suddenly changed. Emma is back. Maybe Oliver won't marry Ava. I wasn't unaware of such remarks. Nor did I completely not care. Coupled with the pressure from my parents, I had always thought about just getting married quickly. So I painstakingly arranged a perfect wedding. But in the end, I ended up in a mess. Later, I overheard his conversation with someone else. The person asked him, "How's the preparation for your wedding going?" At that time, he was gracefully swirling the wine glass. "What preparation? Anyway, it won't happen. After all these years, I'm tired of playing around. Ava has no novelty for me anymore." Coincidentally, Emma is back now. I'm planning to break up with Ava sometime. For me, marrying him was a wish I had held on to for years. But for him, it was just an act. However, I still wanted to take a gamble that he was just talking and wouldn't really ruin our wedding. So I didn't expose him and continued to prepare for the wedding as usual. But later, my eyes unconsciously turned red. Mom saw me staring blankly at the mirror, and she came over worriedly and took my hand. "If you don't want to get married, it's okay. Your dad and I just want you to be happy. We were too hasty. We just thought that you and this person have some connection. Maybe it could turn out to be a good marriage by chance. In this way, you can settle down and stay by our side earlier. Your dad and I were afraid that you'd be soft-hearted and go back to that Oliver." Hearing what Mom said, I wiped my tears. "Mom, what are you talking about? I'm willing. And I also trust you and Dad's judgment." Hearing me say this, Mom felt relieved. When I was going downstairs, my phone suddenly started vibrating like crazy. I took it out and answered. On the other end was Oliver's heart-rending roar. "Ava, are you crazy? Why are you so stubborn? You did something wrong out of pettiness. I just asked you to apologize. Is it that difficult? We've been together for so many years. Are you still playing that game of playing hard to get and using retreat as an advance? Is it interesting?" Emma's in a very low mood. I'm giving you until today to apologize to her. Otherwise, I will never make up with you again. I was stunned on the spot, and Mom heard all these words. I felt a twinge of guilt instantly. "Oliver, you actually treated my daughter like this?" Mom said through gritted teeth. For so many years, Mom had endured the pain of being separated from her daughter because she thought I was happy. But now she suddenly learned that her daughter had had such a hard time in the past few years. Oliver on the other end of the phone fell silent instantly. He never expected that it was my mom's voice. Then he suddenly reacted and remembered something that made him tremble all over. Ava had really left. She had gone thousands of miles away to be with her parents. His tone was filled with obvious panic and disbelief. "Auntie, why is Ava's phone in your hand? Where is she?" After asking subconsciously, he remembered to explain to my mom. "Auntie, you misunderstood. It was Ava who made my friend feel bad. I just wanted her to apologize. I was too impulsive with my tone just now. Please pass the phone to her." Mom said coldly, "I don't care about all this. As for you, for the sake of my daughter who loved you for so long, I won't make things difficult for you. But don't harass my daughter anymore, or I'll break your legs." After scolding, Mom hung up the phone. She kept raising her hand to wipe her tears. I walked over and hugged Mom. It's okay, Mom. Every woman has to have some experiences. It's all in the past. After Mom gave me back my phone, I saw that there were many unread messages. They were from some friends and colleagues. They were all asking me what had happened and why Oliver was harassing everyone like a madman. They wanted to confirm whether I was getting married and who I was getting married to. You have no idea. He was like a lunatic, crying and making a scene on the phone. He also said that it's all your fault that things have come to this. You don't want to live a good life, you did something wrong but refused to apologize, and you even went home to complain to your parents. In the past, hearing these words would have made me very aggrieved and angry. I would have gone to question him about who was really at fault and why he could say such things about me. However, now I felt that none of this was that important. Just then, his phone call came in again. Just as I was going downstairs to greet the bridegroom's party. He sobbed on the other end and asked me, "If you really don't want to apologize, forget it. I forgive you. Stop making trouble and come back. Let's live a good life." If it were in the past, I would have been extremely touched if he could do this for me. Now, I just found it funny. I'm afraid I can't come back. You know what, after I get married, I'll call you back to talk about this. Today is my big day. Don't make me restless. If you really think I didn't officially break up with you before, then I'm saying it now. Oliver, stop harassing my colleagues and friends. We've broken up, and I'm really getting married. As for the rest, I don't want to mention it anymore. I thought I had made myself clear enough, but to my surprise, Oliver just sneered softly. Ava, you're so eager to get married? After all that talk, aren't you just trying to force me to marry you? Come back now, and I'm willing to marry you. I was at a loss for words. I couldn't even understand who I had fallen in love with in the past. Since he was still so self-opinionated, I had no choice but to send him the e-invitation. It clearly stated, "Mr. Ethan and Ms. Ava sincerely invite you and your family to attend the ceremony." The phone stayed quiet for a long time. After thinking for a while, I turned it off. I decided to focus on this important event in my life. No matter what kind of person the other party was, since I had promised to get married, I had to take responsibility for him. Soon, Ethan's family came to pick me up. The moment the groom entered the door, I was stunned. I had a strong feeling that I had seen him somewhere before. But before I could figure it out, he spoke. Ava, do you remember 15 years ago? At the sound of his voice, I felt a jolt through my body. My cheeks suddenly burned. He brought up a past event that I had almost forgotten. 15 years ago, I had a serious illness. For a few days, for the convenience of dressing changes and observation, I stayed in the hospital. One night, a little boy was suddenly admitted to the adjacent bed. He was crying and refused to get an injection. It was me who coaxed him with candies. As long as you cooperate with the doctor, sister will give you candies for a lifetime. I couldn't believe it was him. Looking at the groom in a traditional Chinese wedding attire, handsome and looking at me affectionately with his eyes, I blushed and lowered my head in embarrassment. After leaving home, we didn't talk much along the way. But there was an inexplicable sense of ambiguous excitement between us. Suddenly, the wedding car convoy stopped. A black Porsche blocked our way ahead. Oliver, with messy hair and blood-red eyes, got out of the car and kept pounding on the car window. Ava, get out! Do you hear me? You're not allowed to marry him. I gave Ethan a reassuring look and was about to get out of the car to deal with Oliver myself. But Ethan grabbed my hand and smiled gently, "I'll go with you." Seeing us holding hands, Oliver was even more stimulated. He shouted and lunged forward, but the bodyguards quickly stopped him. "What on earth are you trying to do? Are you going to fight me for this man?" Oliver glared at Ethan hatefully, worried that Ethan might feel wronged, I was desperately thinking about what to do in my mind. But Ethan had already shielded me behind him. From now on, she'll be Mrs. Ethan. What he said made everyone present couldn't help but laugh. Oliver went crazy in an instant. She's Mrs. Ethan? No, I don't agree. Ava can only be mine. She's been my admirer for so many years. The only person she loves is me. She's just using you to make me jealous. I gently put my arm around Ethan and looked at Oliver coldly. Don't be so self-centered. Today is my wedding. Ethan is my husband. I don't want you to appear in front of us again. Oliver, just leave now. Oliver looked at me sadly. Ava, I know you're doing this on purpose. I know I was wrong. Come back with me. You can hit me or scold me. I've already sent Emma away. I know I was bad before. It was all my fault. But don't you have any part in it? People say that both sides need to work together to create a sense of freshness in a relationship. You were too good to me. I never thought I'd lose you. Gradually, of course, there was no such freshness, and that's why I drifted away from you. But I've really never loved anyone else. I laughed mockingly. I know. You held hands because you've been used to it since childhood. You kissed in the street because you were playing a game. You shared a room on business trips because she didn't trust you alone. You called off our wedding for her because you two are special to each other in your hearts, and you didn't want to make her too sad. You've said this kind of thing many times. Oliver stammered, I'm sorry. These 3 words, I'm sorry, were really cheap. You knew I'd be sad when you did those things. What's the point of saying you're sorry now? Oliver couldn't believe that I was really determined to break up. He couldn't believe that even though he bought the earliest flight to chase after me, he still couldn't change the fact that I was getting married. His eyes turned red, and tears fell down. If it were before, seeing him cry like this would have made me soft-hearted long ago. But now, I just felt annoyed. He seemed to remember something suddenly and took out a velvet brocade box from his bag. Inside was the wedding ring I had prepared before. He had always refused to wear it, and later when I decided to leave, I put my ring back in the box. I never thought he would bring it here today. Ava, do you remember this pair of rings? I was naive before. Now I've seen clearly what's in my heart. Come back with me, please. As he spoke, he reached out to pull me but was blocked by Ethan. Although Ethan was young, he had a strong presence. Mr. Oliver, I've heard a bit about your affairs. I won't comment on who's right or wrong. But since it's all in the past, please don't pester her anymore. Let's part amicably. Oliver, in a fit of rage, raised his hand to hit him. My heart skipped a beat, but then I saw Ethan move quickly and hit Oliver first. Sorry, Mr. Oliver. It's my reflex. When I see someone trying to hit, I just want to strike first. Ethan turned back to me with an apologetic look. Honey, you won't be mad at me, will you? I smiled. Okay, stop messing around. We might be late for the wedding. Let's go. Oliver covered his face. Ava, after all these years of relationship, am I less important to you than a man from an arranged marriage? I stopped. You also know it's been so many years. You understand what I've sacrificed for you, so you should understand what I want most now. Just let me be. These words made Oliver stop in his tracks as he was about to chase after us. Ethan and I got back in the car. From the rearview mirror, I saw Oliver slumped on the ground, crying loudly. I didn't know what he was so sad about. He had made all the choices himself. What was he regretting now? But all of this didn't matter to me anymore. What mattered was that in the future, I was sure to be very happy. At night, looking at Ethan sleeping soundly beside me, my heart was filled with contentment. There were still a few unread messages on my phone. Among them was a message from Oliver. He said he was leaving and would never pester me again, hoping that I would truly be happy. 2 years later, I heard news about Oliver and Emma from a friend. For some unknown reason, they had a falling out. Emma spread some unfavorable remarks about Oliver everywhere. She even posted some of Oliver's private photos on a public platform. Oliver, unable to contain his anger, went to reason with her. But she publicly retorted, "What? Dare you say that's not you in the photo? You look decent on the outside, but you're actually disgusting. Isn't that about you?" In a fit of anger, Oliver slapped her. "You're the one who's truly disgusting." "Who's disgusting? Wasn't it you who was flirting with me while having a fiancé?" Her words hit a nerve with Oliver. Oliver took out a fruit knife from his bag and stabbed it fiercely into her abdomen. Fortunately, timely rescue was provided, and no one lost their life. However, Oliver's own future was completely ruined. But that had nothing to do with me anymore.